Chelsea 0, Liverpool 1. It's a weird game for the neutral, wasn't it? There was not many clinical opportunities being taken, hence it being 0-0 and going to extra time. But Liverpool will be absolutely thrilled with the result, Myles, obviously. The start of this talk of a quadruple. We've been down this road before with Liverpool, haven't we? What did you make of the game? It's a funny one to analyse as a neutral, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was, because I don't think there was a great deal of quality in it, despite it being so open. There were some good chances made for both teams. I think Chelsea probably had the better chances, but Liverpool created more of them, and eventually that paid off. I actually think this is the fairest result that could have happened. Liverpool, I think, were good value for the win, and considering the circumstances around the game, absolutely, this was the right outcome. I think when you consider how many players Liverpool had absent, that team realistically of kids with Van Dijk, Kanate, just kind of Marshall and everything else, that's a really impressive win for them. And Chelsea have to look at themselves and what a missed opportunity this is, because you don't get many worse Liverpool teams in a cup final than the one they had today. And Van Dijk pretty much single-handedly managed to beat Chelsea. It's very poor from Chelsea's point of view.
Yeah, it's an interesting one into thinking about what Chelsea will take from this, Dave. And we'll talk about those in a minute. But let's look at Liverpool and their reaction to this. Obviously, this is the start of what's going to be quite an emotional kind of end of the season, isn't it? It's nothing like this, really. And there are echoes, really, for this team, I think, of United when Ferguson was leaving. There's a few players you're thinking, are they over the hill? There's a few young players coming through. And how they cope after Klopp will be interesting to see. But how they finish with Klopp, this has got to be the start of a galvanising end for them. Whatever happens, something is going to be positive, at least. There's a trophy to his name. What do you think they'll take from this?
I think they'll take a lot of heart. I think from the performance itself, there were moments in their game where I think there were turning points. I think when Gravenberch went off injured, that was a moment where you thought, this is not looking good for Liverpool. And you looked at their bench at the beginning of the game. They really lacked a lot of experience in there. And they ended the game with their senior players really stood up. I think Luis Diaz did as well as he could, to be honest. I think there are times when he tried to do a little bit too much, but I thought his effort was, so commendable in how much energy he put into the play in the front line, and then obviously in that midfield, which they really controlled for much of the game. To be honest, I think Conor Bradley had another outstanding game. It's crazy, really, to see how soundly he's adjusted to the senior game. Obviously, this is a kid who's only had 6 or 7 senior games, I think, and he just looks completely at home with it. I think that with the game itself, I think if you look at especially extra time, I don't think anyone anticipated it to pan out the way it did. If you looked at how the 90 minutes finished, Chelsea finished so strongly, it looked like a matter of time before they would score sort of after 85 minutes, and they were cranking up the pressure. So for Liverpool to actually go on, and I think especially that trio of subs that they made at the very end of the game, Dan's provided a lot more energy for them on the front foot, and they just continued on the front foot until Van Dijk, obviously. Chelsea didn't take that first warning, the goal that got disallowed, and then conceded a very similar goal.
Interesting, though, to think about this Liverpool average age of the team that finished Myles, and the Chelsea match as well. Their team was matching up almost pound for pound, almost like 4 times the value or something like that. Somebody said it was ridiculous how much money was spent on this Chelsea team compared to the youth of this Liverpool team. And I know that was enforced by the injuries they had. But it does make you think how life after Klopp will work when a manager of his calibre can get a team performing at that level in a cup final with players that have got zero experience, a couple of games each to their name, some of them. He's going to be hard to replace, isn't he, Jurgen Klopp? And I think this kind of highlights how good he is for Liverpool.
Yeah, of course. I think Carragher and Neville mentioned it quite a few times on commentary that one of the things that was really valuable about Klopp is the amount of trust that he puts into young players, and actually how many managers would have the confidence to turn to those young players in a cup final when they needed them, and not just kind of rely on the fact that Gakpo could keep going, for example. Because actually Gakpo was largely ineffective through most of the game, and replacing him, Dave's right, was fundamental for Liverpool going forward and kind of causing Chelsea more problems. So, yeah, of course, it would be a real struggle to kind of find anyone to fill those boots. We knew that way before this final. But I think even seeing now that with the bare bones of this squad, you can't argue with what a triumph this is. And then on the other side of the coin, you've got a Chelsea side, which is also really young, I think we should remember, and is still kind of coming together. But they looked far more naive and far less like a team. They've played together far more than a lot of these young players that Liverpool will have had experience in the first team. And yet they look like strangers for the majority of the game. They had these like weird short spells where they were progressing really, really well and playing really nice football, passing the ball in good triangles, kind of moving for each other. And then that would just disappear for like 30 minutes at a time. And it's very odd. So the maturity of this Liverpool side clearly comes from the leadership that it has in Klopp and Van Dijk, because I thought he was imperious today. Him and Canate, I think, both had excellent games. And Chelsea obviously made chances because, well, look at the star power they had on the pitch in theory. They were always going to make chances. But Liverpool's defence, and Kelleher as well, dealt with it incredibly well, I thought.
So when you look at this game, and there was a few flashpoints, Dave, wasn't there, from a VAR point of view, and I think both teams will have some right to feel aggrieved that decisions didn't go their way. But let's focus on the ones that affected Liverpool mainly. So the first goal was disallowed. Trying to wrap my head around this because was it Endo who was pushing a player away, and he was in an offside position when doing so. Yeah, it was Levi Colwill, wasn't it? And the argument was that Colwill would have helped defend Van Dijk's attack on the goal, which stands to reason, I guess. But these kind of things happen in the box all the time. And I think that's the argument here. How much consistency are we going to have now with this kind of action in the box? Was it purely the fact that he was in an offside position when it happened? Or is the fact that it happened the issue? It's a bit of a grey area, and I've not seen many examples of this kind of decision being upheld before. So where does the consistency for this kind of thing start and end?
The offside was very circumstantial. I think it was another one of those. I think I've seen one earlier in the season. Harry Maguire scored as a header where he was in a position where you don't know whether the defender would have got to it or not, and he interrupted in play and United scored from it. It was another one of those. It's almost going back to the old days when offside, it was basically if you're offside, and it was called as an offside. And that's kind of how it seemed. And I think it was a little bit harsh, to be honest. Again, it's very circumstantial because you're saying that is that defender definitely going to get to the ball ahead of Virgil van Dijk? I mean, we won't know. And I mean, a betting man would say Van Dijk probably beats any player to that ball, which is so strong in the air. It's a difficult one to analyse really, but obviously the official has made that decision, and we're constantly wondering, aren't we, over some of the officiating this season, and obviously the decision making that VAR obviously look at.
Well, it's that we watch replays of things like that, and we're still thinking, well, I don't know what the referee's going to say. I don't know what the officials are going to say at the end of it. And it was similar with the Caicedo challenge on Ryan Gravenberch, like you said. Obviously, he injured the guy. Yeah, so, I mean, should he have been on the pitch, Caicedo, Myles? Do you think that was he unlucky?
It's not the first time with Caicedo. I don't know what's happened to him, but he looks. I honestly think he looks terrible at Chelsea. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I don't watch enough of him. But anytime I watch him play for Chelsea, he looks so clumsy and like clunky on the ball, and he just doesn't seem to have that same sort of nous that he had at Brighton to read the game really well, distribute the ball really well. He's reckless, and I think the challenge probably was just a yellow card. It was a very poor challenge. I think
didn't even get
harsh to send him off, but he didn't even get booked. And with the first decision, like Dave says, it's frustrating not knowing what the outcome is going to be from the official. That's kind of true, but some things are subjective in football, and I'm okay with that. I think this decision was very harsh on Liverpool, but I think it gave Chelsea a bit of a get-out-of-jail-free card, because, again, I think their naivety showed, because other than that, it was Chilwell marking Van Dijk.
Yeah.
Like, what kind of pairing is that? I know, obviously, like Dave says, he's such a big presence. It's going to be hard for anyone to mark him, but it just felt like throughout this game, Chelsea got away with a lot and failed to capitalise on it. They could have gone down to 10 men with Caicedo on multiple occasions, actually, because he committed so many fouls across the game. He was giving the ball away left, right and centre, and Liverpool failed to capitalise on it as well. They had that decision go in their favour, obviously, with the Van Dijk goal. All of Liverpool's players are out. There is no better time for Chelsea to have taken advantage. And Dave's right, going into extra time, I was convinced Chelsea had got it then. They were able to bring like Mudryk and Madueke and Nkunku off the bench. That's some real serious attacking talent. And they absolutely capitulated. They just looked so naive and lacked any kind of maturity, particularly that midfield. I thought Enzo Fernandez and Caicedo, neither of them gave themselves any kind of glory. I thought they were both, to be honest, quite embarrassing performances at times.
Well, you say Conor Gallagher was the shining light. We said that before the game, really. And how many times has that been the case when the three of them have been on the pitch? And he's the one they consider potentially dispensable. It's crazy, isn't it? Some of the figures that you think about, they've paid for these players and they're just not producing. And Chelsea, once again, kind of their own worst enemies in this game. The amount of chances they created and could have scored from. Do you think they've got a right to be aggrieved, Dave, with Raheem Sterling's disallowed goal? Is there anything in there that makes you think that probably wasn't offside? Because the angle they shown back from the replay was so tight. Like, it was such a weird angle. I couldn't see any definitive lines that proved either way. It was almost inconclusive.
I've seen the other one now, though.
It does look offside from the other one.
Yeah, it is. It was very close, wasn't it?
I don't understand why it takes them so long to show these other angles sometimes. VAR. It obviously creates kind of doubt, I think, especially in fans as well. They show these completely unfavourable angles where you think, well, that's onside. But then they're so delayed in actually showing, the ideal angles. But I think it was offside. I mean, Chelsea had so many chances where they should be kicking themselves, really, because with the chances that they had, particularly at the end of the second half, they should really have probably won the game, to be honest. But I did notice when Conor Gallagher was forced to come off, they just lacked a bit of thrust, to be honest. He was the one.
He looked gutted, didn't he?
He was the one providing that tempo, and that, especially when they were pressing, he was always the guy kind of getting them up the field. They just lacked a bit of seniority, I think, especially in the extra time period where there wasn't any leadership in there to actually give them extra. Yeah.
Even he looked really nervous, though. The whole Chelsea team seemed nervous. A few of them really grew into the game. First 15 minutes, they were terrible, Chelsea. And Liverpool, honestly, they could have had 2 or 3 with the way that Chelsea were playing. Like, Malo Gusto just seemed to be giving the ball away every time he touched it, putting it out for a throw-in. And then by the end of the game, he was probably Chelsea's best player. I thought he really grew into it. Yeah. But Gallagher was the same. Gallagher, I think he's fantastic. And I think he probably was one of Chelsea's most threatening players. He should have scored 2 or 3 goals, though, really. And it seemed like nerves. That one where Kelleher comes and closes him down, he's better than that. He should have taken that chance.
Just hesitated, didn't he?
And it's the other way around. It was Liverpool that were fielding teenagers who've never played in a big game before, and all of a sudden they're in a cup final. And these Chelsea players, like Enzo Fernandez, has won the World Cup, let's not forget. And then he's trying this weird back heel at the goal where he's got like 3 players he can lay it after. It's terrible.
It was a simple pullback. And
he just didn't look.
We can't go on without mentioning Gary Neville's one-liner towards the end.
Brilliant.
£1 billion bottle job.
Yeah.
The £1 billion bottle jobs, yeah. I think, well...
Excellent.
It's one of them seasons where Chelsea will look to write it off now in some ways because they've got the FA Cup still to play for, haven't they? I'm sure they'll be looking to try and progress or at least win that. But in the league, they're struggling to finish in the top 10. So it's a strange season for Chelsea. And it's almost one of those ones where, a bit like Manchester United, we kind of have to look to next season now and trying to sort of consolidate as much as we can this time around. But for Liverpool, obviously, they've been away from the Premier League this weekend and they still remain top. Have you got any concerns, Myles, looking at how threadbare their team is becoming, that they can stay there?
I think any team that suffers the kind of injuries that Liverpool have had would struggle, and we're talking about really, really key players. So the fact that they've come through this cup final without Alisson, Salah, Núñez, Trent might galvanise them slightly and help them move forward. Obviously, they've got that added momentum of Klopp kind of pushing for one last hurrah as well, and I think that will give them a massive boost. However, when the fixtures do start piling up, when European football comes back as well, they need to get these players back and back quickly. Seeing Gravenberch go off today is the last thing they needed. Like, it's such a difficult point. And when Arsenal and City are firing and kind of climbing back up the table and competing, it does seem dangerous because you can't say that Arsenal's squad's hit by anywhere near the kind of injury crisis that Liverpool are having, and neither are City really now. Yeah. So that is a danger. It is. But all credit to them today. I think it's very rare that we give Liverpool praise on this podcast as 2 Man United fans and myself. But I have to say, they dug in when they needed to. They played good football at times as well, despite kind of still trying to gel things together. And Van Dijk proved why he is one of the best leaders, definitely, in world football. He was absolutely outstanding, I thought. I thought he really commanded it. And the fact that he went forward and managed to put the ball in the back of the net twice as well, showed what today meant to him, I think, as well. And then really wanting to give Klopp that last, at least, something to take away from it. So who knows whether they can do that in the league as well.
Well, I think it's a performance that Klopp is rightly proud of. And as you say, if anything, it probably proves that they can grind out a performance against the top team in situations and circumstances that are kind of against them. So, yeah, well played, Liverpool, he says, through gritted teeth.